I had always cherished my daughter, Lydia, and her happiness had always been my top priority. Her wedding day was meant to be a magical celebration, full of laughter, love, and family. But as the reception reached its peak, a whisper cut through the festivities, sharp and sinister. My new son-in-law, Tristan, leaned close, his eyes gleaming with greed. "Give us your beach house as a wedding gift, or I'll lie and say you tried to seduce me," he hissed. For a heartbeat, shock and disbelief froze me. Then carefully, I let a calm smile spread across my face, hiding the fury bubbling inside. "Oh, darling," I said lightly, "before you make your little speech, why don't you introduce everyone to my special guest?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward the person I had brought, and in that instant, Tristan's confident smirk drained from his face, replaced by terror. What unfolded next left the entire wedding hall in stunned silence and shattered the deceit he had built. "My name is Marjorie Sinclair. I am 58 years old. Today was supposed to be a day of pure joy, my daughter Lydia's wedding, a culmination of months of planning, decorating, and anticipation. From sunrise, I had moved through the house with precision, arranging fresh flowers in elegant vases, straightening chairs, and checking the alignment of every napkin and centerpiece. The house smelled of jasmine and fresh bread, the air buzzing with quiet excitement. I envisioned the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the smiles that would fill the room. But as I glanced toward the driveway, where the first guests were expected to arrive, a flicker of unease tugged at my chest. Something in Tristan's calculated demeanor during our morning rehearsal whispered of hidden intentions, and though I kept a serene smile, a subtle tension began to coil within me. The reception hall was bathed in soft, golden light, and I moved among the tables, adjusting centerpieces, fluffing chair covers, and ensuring every flower bloomed in perfect alignment. The linens were crisp, the silverware polished until it gleamed, and the bouquets smelled faintly of roses and lilies. I envisioned Lydia walking in, radiant, and all eyes turning to her with admiration. But even in this calm, celebratory atmosphere, I couldn't ignore the faint smirk I had noticed on Tristan's face earlier, a subtle arrogance that unsettled me. Guests would soon arrive, oblivious to the tension hiding beneath the surface. I reminded myself to stay composed. Any hint of worry would only give him the upper hand. Today was not just about celebration. It was about observation, patience, and preparation. The first guests arrived, their laughter and greetings filling the air with warmth. I moved to greet them, offering smiles and handshakes, masking the unease I felt as Tristan lingered nearby. Lydia beamed, radiant in her dress, unaware of the subtle tension rippling beneath the surface. Family, friends, and relatives commented on the decor, the aroma of the food, and the joyful energy of the morning. Yet every glance toward Tristan reminded me to stay vigilant. He had a way of charming those around him, masking intentions I did not yet fully understand. I observed his every movement, the subtle eye rolls, the smirks, the whispered words to close friends, cataloging clues. While the atmosphere remained light and cheerful on the surface, a quiet storm was brewing beneath the smiles. During the rehearsal, Tristan's behavior became slightly more revealing. He whispered comments to Lydia that seemed playful but carried undertones of manipulation. I watched closely, noting the way he subtly tried to assert dominance, the small gestures meant to intimidate or unsettle. Guests didn't notice these undercurrents, but I cataloged every word, every glance. My heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with a growing awareness that this day might not unfold as planned. Every minor misstep by him became a potential clue, a puzzle piece to be used later. The calm celebrations masked the tension building quietly beneath, and I reminded myself that patience would be my greatest ally in revealing the truth at the perfect moment. As dinner approached, Tristan's subtle manipulations became more apparent. He directed family members with faintly condescending remarks, interrupted casual conversations, and tried to draw attention to his influence. I observed silently, noting how the energy in the room shifted with his small provocations. My mind worked like a camera, capturing expressions, overheard words, and patterns of arrogance. Lydia laughed, unaware, and I restrained myself from reacting outwardly. The more I watched, the clearer it became. This was not merely a celebration, it was a test. Tristan believed he could intimidate and control the room, but I resolved that every move would be documented in my mind, to be used strategically when the time for revelation arrived. Even as the reception continued, I sensed Tristan's hidden intentions. A glance here, a whispered joke there, the faint smirk he used to charm and manipulate, it all added up. While everyone else focused on the festivities, I stayed alert, cataloging every nuance. I spoke politely, moved gracefully, and maintained the perfect host demeanor, masking the fire of awareness inside me. Patience had become my weapon, observation my shield. I could feel that the day might take a darker turn, but I would not give him the satisfaction of witnessing fear or anger. Every detail mattered, and I knew that when the time came, My careful attention to his subtle moves would allow me to reclaim control and deliver justice in the most unforgettable way. As the evening progressed, Tristan leaned close with a conspiratorial whisper, testing boundaries and planting seeds of unease. Though his words were veiled, their implication was clear. He believed he could manipulate the situation to his advantage. I smiled politely, letting the whisper hang in the air, while inside my mind I began planning the perfect response. Every smirk, every attempt to assert dominance was recorded carefully, each one a clue to use later. This quiet foreshadowing revealed his greed, arrogance, and willingness to lie, signaling that the celebration I had envisioned might soon turn into a dramatic confrontation. I remained composed, my calm exterior masking the growing determination that would soon shift the power entirely in my favor. The reception was in full swing, laughter and music blending with clinking glasses and animated conversations. Yet I noticed Tristan subtly guiding Lydia away from the crowd, steering her toward a quieter corner under the chandelier. His hand brushed hers, a faint, calculated attempt to assert control, while his eyes flicked toward me as if daring me to intervene. I stayed composed, moving with casual grace among other guests, observing his every motion. Every whispered word he spoke, every smirk, every subtle gesture was a test of boundaries. My mind cataloged each action, aware that this was more than a casual interaction. It was the first real display of his entitlement. Even while maintaining the appearance of a calm mother, inside, I was already analyzing, mentally preparing for the moment when his arrogance would be exposed to everyone. Tristan leaned close enough for only me to hear, his voice low and sly, and dropped the first real hint of his audacity. "Marjorie," he whispered, smirking, "maybe you should consider giving us your beach house as a wedding gift. It would make life so much easier." My heart skipped, but my face remained calm, serene, almost amused. I tilted my head slightly, masking the sudden rush of anger. The audacity of his demand, bold, entitled, and shocking, revealed a man who believed charm could override morality. Guests remained unaware, laughing nearby, while I silently catalogued every word, every breath, and every flicker of his expression. This was no ordinary wedding tension. It was the opening of a challenge I would meet strategically, ensuring that his arrogance would soon become the centerpiece of his undoing. Even subtle behavior carries weight, and I noticed some guests glancing toward Tristan, sensing something off. Though no one yet understood the full story, whispers and quiet looks began to circulate. I observed each reaction carefully, noting who might align with me later, who could bear witness, and who would be swayed by perception. Tristan, unaware that his bravado had already drawn subtle attention, continued his subtle power plays, adjusting his posture, leaning in, and speaking with a sly smile. My calm exterior became a shield, allowing me to appear unaffected, while every detail of his arrogance and entitlement was seared into my memory. The room's social dynamics were quietly shifting, and I was already mentally plotting how to use perception, observation, and timing to transform his audacity into his downfall. The moment came when Tristan stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper, and issued his first direct threat. "Give us the beach house, or I'll tell everyone that you—" He paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. I felt a flash of heat but held my expression perfectly neutral. In that instant, I recognized the depth of his audacity. He believed that a casual lie would intimidate me. Instead of reacting, I allowed the moment to hang like a charged silence, cataloging the exact phrasing, the nervous flicker in his eyes, and the slight tremor in his voice. This wasn't just a threat, it was an opening, a window into his weaknesses, arrogance, and greed. I felt the surge of clarity. Every word, every pause, would be a piece of evidence in the plan I would execute to humiliate and expose him with precision. I took a slow breath and allowed my calm exterior to settle into place. Anger had no power over the situation. Only patience and strategy could dismantle Tristan's threats. I began formulating a mental plan, mapping the timing, witnesses, and subtle actions that would allow me to reveal the truth while maintaining composure. Every smile, every gesture, and every conversational turn became a tool. I reminded myself that haste would ruin the effect. Patience was essential. As the reception continued around us, with music and laughter masking the tension, I felt a quiet thrill in knowing that this situation, which Tristan believed gave him leverage, would instead become the stage for his downfall, orchestrated with precision, and the satisfaction of knowing justice would unfold naturally. Even quietly, I knew I would need subtle support to reinforce the impact of the revelation. Using my phone discreetly, I contacted a trusted friend, someone influential who could lend credibility without exposing our plan prematurely. I explained the situation in measured tones, omitting unnecessary details while highlighting the urgency of timing. Their willingness to assist reinforced my confidence. I felt the first tangible sense of control, the calm realization that I was no longer isolated in managing Tristan's audacity. Every whispered conversation, every nod of agreement from my ally, became a thread in the web I was weaving, ensuring that when the moment came, my strategic patience and quiet influence would dominate the room, leaving no one questioning who truly held authority. As I observed Tristan further, I catalogued every micro expression, misstep, and hint of insecurity. His arrogance masked deeper flaws, and I began mentally mapping how each could be exploited subtly. The way he shifted his weight, the occasional hesitation in his speech, the subtle nervous glance, each was a clue. I envisioned scenarios where small, carefully orchestrated nudges would unravel his composed facade, magnifying his mistakes in front of witnesses. This mental mapping became a blueprint, a silent strategy that would allow me to turn humiliation into revelation and greed into exposure. By the end of the evening, I would not need aggression. Timing, observation, and careful planning would transform the situation entirely in my favor. Marjorie watched Tristan as he mingled with family and friends, noting every gesture and word with meticulous attention. His confidence was a fragile facade. Subtle smirks and forced laughter betrayed cracks beneath the surface. He interrupted conversations with a hint of condescension, trying to assert dominance without overtly offending anyone. Marjorie catalogued each interaction silently, imagining how these flaws could be amplified when the moment came. While everyone else enjoyed the festivities, she observed patterns, hesitations in his speech, fleeting nervous glances, and overcompensated gestures that revealed his arrogance and carelessness. Her calm exterior masked the thrill building inside. She was no longer reacting, she was strategizing. Each movement he made was a piece in the puzzle of his eventual undoing, and she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing the room's dynamics were slowly tilting in her favor. Without raising suspicion, Marjorie began performing small, deliberate gestures designed to unsettle Tristan subtly. She offered polite compliments to family members that indirectly highlighted his flaws, adjusted seating arrangements so he would feel slightly excluded, and asked seemingly innocent questions that required precise answers he couldn't provide. Every smile, tilt of her head, and gentle remark was a tiny, calculated nudge, planting seeds of unease in his mind. Tristan's confidence wavered in imperceptible ways. A flash of irritation or hesitation crossed his face before he masked it with a smirk. Guests remained oblivious, enjoying the celebration, unaware of the psychological chess unfolding. Marjorie's calmness amplified the effect. Her quiet influence orchestrated the environment, making his mistakes inevitable while leaving her seemingly uninvolved, a silent conductor controlling every subtle tension in the room. As the morning unfolded, some guests began to pick up on Tristan's awkwardness. Small inconsistencies, misremembered names, hesitated responses, subtle contradictions drew curious glances. Marjorie smiled politely, directing attention elsewhere, but inside she recorded every reaction. Each whisper and uncertain glance amplified Tristan's growing discomfort without any direct confrontation. Guests sensed a quiet tension they couldn't fully name, and their subtle questioning added pressure. Meanwhile, Tristan remained oblivious to how much perception was working against him. Marjorie's patience paid off. By allowing minor errors to be noticed naturally, she magnified their impact, building a foundation for the eventual dramatic revelation. Each small slip now carried social weight, creating cracks in the arrogant facade Tristan had relied on to manipulate the room. Marjorie quietly encouraged Lydia's family to observe and stay alert, planting awareness without confrontation. She asked pointed questions during casual conversations, complimented those who noticed inconsistencies, and subtly drew attention to overlooked details. Family members, now more conscious, began noticing small, disjointed moments in Tristan's behavior. His arrogance, once unchecked, was now under the scrutiny of those whose opinion mattered most. Marjorie's calm demeanor gave credibility to their observations, making each remark or hesitation more impactful. This quiet orchestration created a network of subtle witnesses, ensuring that when the final reveal came, the room would already sense the truth. No direct accusation was necessary. Perception alone was enough to destabilize Tristan's carefully constructed confidence and build anticipation for the moment when all his lies would be exposed. Unaware of Marjorie's silent manipulation, Tristan began making small mistakes. He mispronounced names, contradicted himself in casual remarks, and fumbled minor gestures that once seemed insignificant. Marjorie observed with an almost clinical detachment, cataloging every slip for use later. Each misstep amplified tension, both in the room and within Tristan himself, who began to sense vaguely that something was amiss. Guests noticed subtle discomfort in his demeanor, further destabilizing him. Marjorie's quiet orchestration ensured that these errors appeared natural, not forced, making them far more effective. Every minor blunder stacked upon the last, weaving a web of psychological pressure that she could exploit when the time came to deliver her ultimate, carefully timed revelation. Marjorie's eyes never left Tristan as she catalogued every flustered glance, hesitation, and micro-expression. Every stammer, nervous laugh, and fleeting flicker of panic became a data point in her mental dossier. Each detail would serve as ammunition for the reveal, providing undeniable evidence of his arrogance and deceit. While he remained oblivious, believing his charm concealed everything, Marjorie's strategic patience ensured that nothing went unnoticed. Even small, inconsequential mistakes were magnified in her mind, forming a blueprint for dismantling his facade. The careful recording of these slips allowed her to anticipate reactions, orchestrate timing, and plan every conversational maneuver for maximum impact. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that every subtle error was a step closer to the climactic moment that would expose him fully. In the quiet moments between toasts and conversations, Marjorie mentally rehearsed the final reveal. She visualized the exact timing, the placement of witnesses, and the reactions of guests. Every subtle misstep Tristan had made was woven into the script of her strategy. She imagined his smirk fading, his arrogance collapsing, and the collective gasp of recognition from the room as the truth unfolded. Each movement, gesture, and whispered word was carefully choreographed in her mind, ensuring that nothing would be left to chance. The rehearsal brought a sense of anticipation and control, and she felt the thrill of knowing that her patience, observation, and subtle influence would soon culminate in a moment of dramatic, unforgettable triumph. Tristan moved through the reception hall with a forced air of confidence, but cracks in his facade were now impossible to ignore. Guests whispered discreetly, noticing the subtle arrogance that previously went unchecked. He tried to charm his way past scrutiny, offering polite smiles that didn't reach his eyes, and laughed at jokes that fell flat. Marjorie observed everything calmly, cataloging gestures, tone, and body language with precision. Even Tristan's attempts to dominate conversations only amplified his flaws, as his forced humor and exaggerated charm drew attention to his insecurities. The room's subtle energy shifted. Those who had been oblivious to his arrogance were now quietly aware. Each whispered comment and side glance reinforced his vulnerability, building a foundation for the moment when Marjorie would execute the revelation that would expose his true nature completely. As the event continued, Tristan began making increasingly noticeable mistakes. He mispronounced names, mixed up seating arrangements, and contradicted himself during conversations with family elders. His attempts to recover only drew more attention to his errors, creating an invisible pressure that even his charm couldn't counter. Guests exchanged glances, some suppressing giggles while others whispered cautiously, sensing tension but unsure of its source. Marjorie smiled softly, maintaining a calm exterior while mentally recording each misstep. Each minor error compounded the previous ones, revealing the pattern of arrogance, carelessness, and entitlement Tristan had relied on to maintain control. The once confident man now seemed flustered and uncertain, the room subtly turning against him without anyone realizing they were participating in Marjorie's carefully orchestrated plan. While Tristan grew increasingly flustered, Marjorie remained the picture of serene composure. She floated through conversations with elegance, gently engaging guests while silently guiding the room's dynamics. Her calm demeanor highlighted his nervous energy, amplifying the perception of his instability. Every smile, every nod, every polite question she asked subtly shifted attention to his flaws without confrontation. Guests were drawn to her poise, sensing the authority she radiated, even if they couldn't articulate why. Tristan's confidence wavered with each passing moment, and he became visibly tense as the atmosphere in the hall subtly shifted. By staying composed, Marjorie ensured that every mistake he made would be magnified naturally, preparing the perfect stage for the dramatic revelation she had meticulously planned. Marjorie subtly steered conversations to highlight contradictions in Tristan's statements and behavior. She asked casual, seemingly innocent questions that forced him to stumble, revealing discrepancies in his stories. Each time he attempted to regain control, she smoothly shifted the discussion, exposing gaps in his narrative without anyone realizing it was orchestrated. Guests began noticing inconsistencies, exchanging curious glances that increased Tristan's discomfort. He tried to laugh off awkward moments, but every misstep reinforced the growing perception of unreliability. Marjorie's strategy was quiet yet effective. By letting social cues and natural reactions expose his flaws, she ensured the entire room was complicit in unraveling his arrogance. Each conversational nudge brought her closer to the ultimate moment when the full truth would be revealed, leaving him powerless and humiliated. As Marjorie's subtle orchestration took effect, Tristan's anxiety became more visible. He shifted uncomfortably in conversations, dropped gestures, and faltered when answering questions from curious guests. The once confident smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of fear as he realized attention was turning against him. His attempts to regain composure only drew further scrutiny, with every eye in the room now unconsciously cataloging his flaws. Marjorie watched silently, noting each reaction, while maintaining a calm and composed presence. The tension she had carefully built now exerted its full force, and Tristan began to realize that the room, the guests, and even his bride-to-be were now witnesses to his unraveling authority. Panic, once subtle, now threatened to expose him completely, and the moment for Marjorie's reveal was approaching. Tristan's missteps multiplied, each minor incident feeding into the next. A mispronounced name here, a flustered gesture there, and contradictory statements became impossible to ignore. The guests' whispers grew more noticeable, their expressions shifting from curiosity to subtle judgment. Marjorie observed each blunder with quiet satisfaction, knowing that every small error strengthened the impact of the eventual revelation. The room had become a stage where his arrogance and entitlement were being naturally exposed, and he had no idea that his own actions had contributed to it. Each compounded mistake drew him further into his own trap, leaving him vulnerable and unprepared for the dramatic consequences Marjorie had meticulously orchestrated. Marjorie ensured that every social dynamic, family member, and guest's attention aligned perfectly for the final reveal. Tristan's flustered energy, compounded mistakes, and growing panic had created an environment primed for exposure. She moved gracefully, maintaining a calm exterior, while the room unwittingly contributed to his downfall. Every glance, whisper, and hesitant step by Tristan worked in her favor, amplifying the tension. Marjorie knew the moment was imminent. Every observer was now a silent witness, ready to recognize the truth when she orchestrated the final confrontation. The stage was set, every variable perfectly arranged, and the culmination of her patient strategy was ready to unfold, ensuring that the revelation would be dramatic, unforgettable, and completely in her control. Want to see how I flipped the entire wedding and left him speechless? Hit like and subscribe. This is where the real drama begins. Marjorie moved through the reception hall with deliberate calm, setting the table for the final act of her strategy. She arranged plates, glasses, and flowers with meticulous precision, ensuring that every element projected elegance and control. The guests, preoccupied with the ongoing celebration, barely noticed her subtle maneuvers. Yet each detail mattered: the positioning of chairs, the lighting that caught Tristan's face at the perfect angle, and the strategic placement of family and friends who would silently witness the reveal. Her hands moved gracefully, her smile serene, masking the storm of anticipation inside. Every element was orchestrated to perfection, from the sparkling champagne flutes to the gentle aroma of freshly baked pastries. The room was now a stage, ready for the moment that would turn arrogance into exposure and fear into empowerment. As Tristan mingled, smug and oblivious, Marjorie signaled subtly, and a well-respected family friend entered the hall. Known for integrity and influence, the guest's presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. Conversations quieted as eyes turned, whispers rippling through clusters of guests. Tristan's confident smirk faltered as he caught sight of the unexpected arrival, his posture stiffening, his charm failing to mask unease. Marjorie's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with his growing tension, highlighting the invisible power dynamic that had silently shifted. Guests, unaware of the full backstory, now instinctively looked to Marjorie, sensing her authority. The arrival of this single figure amplified the subtle cracks in Tristan's arrogance, creating the perfect psychological pressure that Marjorie had carefully cultivated. Every gaze, every shuffle of feet, and every quiet intake of breath contributed to the tension she had orchestrated for maximum impact. Tristan's confident mask shattered as the guest approached, seating themselves beside Marjorie. His jaw tightened, and the smirk that had once concealed arrogance vanished entirely. He attempted a polite greeting, but the words stuck in his throat, swallowed by the sudden awareness that his manipulation and threats were now visible to the entire hall. Guests began exchanging puzzled glances, sensing tension without understanding the details, while Tristan's inner panic grew. Marjorie observed silently, her calm smile unwavering as she allowed the silence to stretch, magnifying his discomfort. Every subtle reaction, his fidgeting hands, darting eyes, and faltering words, played into her plan. The room seemed suspended in anticipation, a living canvas where his arrogance and entitlement were slowly unraveling, and she could feel the thrill of control and justice building with each passing heartbeat. With careful timing, Marjorie began bringing up moments from earlier interactions, her tone casual yet deliberate. She referenced instances of his greed, manipulative whispers, and subtle threats, framing them as part of casual anecdotes. Her words painted a vivid picture for the guests, who were now starting to piece together the disparity between Tristan's charming facade and his true character. She avoided accusations, letting logic and context expose his deceit. Each revelation was like a silent blow, unraveling his arrogance in front of everyone without her raising her voice. Tristan's attempts to interject fell flat. His words were overshadowed by the clarity of Marjorie's composed narrative. The room absorbed the story, whispers spreading, faces turning pale as the subtle but undeniable truth of his entitlement and greed was finally illuminated for all to witness. Whispers and gasps rippled through the hall as guests began connecting the dots. Faces that had been cheerful moments ago now reflected surprise, disbelief, and quiet judgment. Friends and family exchanged glances, some openly shocked at the audacity Tristan had displayed. The social dynamics shifted entirely. Admiration and trust turned toward Marjorie, whose calm composure and subtle storytelling revealed both intelligence and authority. Tristan, increasingly desperate, realized that perception had fully turned against him. He tried to speak to justify himself, but his voice faltered, drowned out by murmurs and questioning looks. Marjorie's strategy had succeeded. Without raising her voice or creating a scene, she had orchestrated a collective recognition of truth, leaving him isolated and powerless in a room that now silently condemned his arrogance and deceit. Marjorie's presence became the undeniable focal point of the hall. Every movement was composed, every word measured. She addressed minor questions and observations with elegance and clarity, subtly reinforcing the perception of her authority. Guests instinctively looked to her for guidance, drawn to the calm yet commanding energy she radiated. Tristan's attempts to assert control were futile. His arrogance had been fully dismantled by her patience, strategy, and observation. By maintaining composure while highlighting facts subtly, she demonstrated that true power lies in intellect, poise, and timing, not aggression. The shift was complete. Respect and attention now centered on her, and the previously dominant figure of Tristan had been reduced to silent, flustered defeat, unable to reclaim the authority he had falsely assumed. By the time the ceremony concluded, the wedding was effectively over. Tristan and Lydia's union was suspended, whispers spreading through the hall as family and guests processed the events. Marjorie, serene and composed, had reclaimed dignity, authority, and control. The carefully orchestrated revelation left an unforgettable impression, a lesson in patience, strategy, and the power of subtle influence. Guests admired her calm confidence, while Tristan's confidence had crumbled entirely. The day had transformed from celebration into a masterclass in controlled empowerment. Marjorie's victory was quiet yet absolute, ensuring that arrogance, greed, and deceit were met with measured, unforgettable justice. In that moment, she had turned humiliation into triumph, leaving the hall, and Tristan, forever aware of her strategic brilliance and unshakable poise.